Welcome back, I'm Adrian May, here to help you through the SAT and the ACT process. And in this video series I'm doing right now on the grammar sections or the writing sections of these two tests, I want to start a mini-series on punctuation. Because punctuation is one of those things that a lot of people never learn in a particularly systematic or focused way, and they have woolly notions of how to use various types of punctuation. They use commas where it feels right, or just where they think you need a pause and these kind of things. And that's not quite a systematic enough knowledge of punctuation to get us through these exams. However, when we do start thinking about punctuation for the SAT and the ACT, there are really only a few rules that we need to know. And once we get those down, these questions actually again become quite easy, and they're usually my favorite kinds of questions, especially on the ACT, which is very punctuation heavy. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by looking at what I call the more unusual forms of punctuation, which is semicolons and colons. So I feel like once we have those out of the way, once we know how to use those, we can then move on to commas, and it's going to become a lot clearer when we use commas where we can and can't use them once we have these two types out of the way. So this video is going to be semicolons, the next video is going to be colons, then we'll move on to dashes, commas, and probably some apostrophes as well, and that is going to be it for punctuation. So, semicolons, when do we use them? You often hear a lot of people say that you use semicolons to separate two independent clauses. And that sounds quite technical. What do we mean by that? And essentially that just means they need to separate two full sentences. So they're basically the same as full stops or periods, that if you have a semicolon, either side of that, you have to have a full sentence on both sides. So that means that if we already have a semicolon, we know that what comes before or after has to be a full sentence. So for example, in the coming ACT question, we have a semicolon, we cannot change. We just need to look at what comes afterwards and to figure out if this is or isn't a full sentence. So let's take a look at this. And if you want to pause the video to see if you can figure out the answer before I go through it, then please do that. I'll give you a few seconds now. Okay, so as we said, we need to figure out if after the semicolon we have a full sentence or not. And what does a sentence need? It always needs a subject and a verb. And I would start then with question D. When we delete the word being, we're left with just at most 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And we don't even have a verb there at all, so that definitely cannot be a full sentence. Then I would look at answer choice A, being at most 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Any verbs that are in the ing form, like being, doing, saying, hearing, they are not going to be your main verb of a sentence. They cannot carry a sentence. So if you just have ing verbs, you do not have a full sentence. So again, A is not going to work. And then we're just left with B and C. And both B and C do have a subject and a verb. They have it, was. So they look quite good. The problem with answer choice B is the word because. That would have because it was at most 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And when you read it out like that, you hear that you need something else to come afterwards. We need to explain because something, something else needs to happen. Because it was at most 40 degrees Fahrenheit, something. And so that's not going to work because our sentence doesn't come to a rest. So we need answer choice C. It was at most 40 degrees Fahrenheit. That was a sentence. If we think about it in its basic form, it was 40 degrees. That is a sentence with a subject, a verb, and an object, and it comes to rest. So the answer choice has to be answer choice C. So we've ascertained that semicolons are basically the same as full stops. So why do you use them? In what circumstances? And we could think, for example, of the sentence, although it was only 9 p.m, Theo sent herself to bed. Full stop. She had to get up for an early flight the next morning. In this case, we can use a full stop. That's totally fine. We have two full sentences. But we might note that the second sentence kind of explains the first. There is a close proximity between the two sentences which are interrelated. And it's this kind of situation we might want to use a semicolon. So we could say, although it was only 9 p.m, Theo headed to bed, semicolon, she had to get up early the next morning for a flight. And this is also totally fine. The second sentence explains the first, but they are two full sentences. We could use a semicolon here. But note that this is totally a judgment call on our part. Both the use of the full stop or the semicolon are correct. They're absolutely fine. And this brings up a useful point for technique in the ACT and the ACT, because those exams won't make you choose between one answer that's simply better than another. If it's a judgment call, the answers have to be either right or wrong. And so whenever you see answer choices that look like the end of a sentence, a full stop, and the start of a new sentence, and another answer choice that is grammatically identical, but you have what looks like the end of a sentence, a semicolon, and then the start of a new sentence, both of these would actually have to be wrong. They both cannot be right. It's a multiple choice exam. Only one answer can be correct. And so if you have two basically identical answers, they would have to be wrong. And what would be happening in this case is that one of the sentences, either before or after the full stop or the semicolon, was not in fact a full sentence. It was an incomplete sentence or a kind of subclause. So this is a really useful technique. If you have two answers that are grammatically identical, you can immediately cross them both out. And we can see this, for example, in the next two questions we're going to look at. In this first example here, answer choices A and C are identical because they both have either a semicolon or a full stop between the words indiscriminately and they. So answer choices A and C are identical. Then we just have to choose between B and D, and we don't need the word therefore in D because we already have the word because. Therefore is a redundant repetition of because, so we don't need it. The answer choice is just B, because digital systems record indiscriminately, they cannot discern important parts of the proceedings. In the next example from the ACT, again we have two examples that are identical. In this case, it's answer choices F and J, which are the same because we have a full stop or a semicolon and no difference between the two. So then again, now we just need to choose between G and H. And the problem with answer choice G is the word and. It's not the parasites, they become parasites and latching on. The description of the latching onto the roots of nearby redwoods is a description of what the parasites do. So the answer choice would have to be answer choice H. In order to survive, these plants become parasites, latching onto the roots of nearby redwoods to tap into their nutrients. Now, questions like the ones before appear in both the SAT and the ACT. However, there's one particular question type in the SAT where this knowledge is also quite useful. And it's in those questions where they ask us the best way to effectively combine two sentences. Now, in these questions, you'll have a sentence in the text itself, and all our answer choices are meant to combine the sentences so they cannot be full sentences. Now, in these questions, if you ever then have semicolons in the answer choices, they immediately have to be wrong because a semicolon doesn't combine two sentences. It is effectively the same as a period, and so you're keeping two full sentences there. And this is especially useful because these questions can be very long and very dense, and that you have four answers that are all fairly similar, and it can be quite confusing and hard to figure out what the right answer is. And sometimes you can cross out up to two answers straight away simply because they have semicolons in them. So let's quickly look at an example of this from the SAT. And again, these questions can look really dense and intimidating, but if you look down the answer choices, we have answer choice A and answer choice C that both have semicolons in, and the semicolons are the same as full stops. These are not combining the two sentences. So we can cross out A and C, and now we have to look at B and D. And if you want to pause the video and figure out which answer choice you think is going to work between B and D, I'll pause that for you now. And so the answer choice we're looking for is in fact answer choice B because it best maintains the flow of the sentence. It's not because they include courses on research and internet search methods that librarians teach classes. There's a logical inconsistency with what's going on there. The answer choice is in fact B. In fact, librarians whose training includes research on internet search methods teach classes in this. It best maintains the structure of the original sentence, and the logical flow of the sentence works a lot better. But this question's way harder to get on top of when you're looking at all four answer choices at the same time. Once it's narrowed down to two choices, the correct answer is much clearer for us to pick. In other question types, however, when we only have either one full stop or one semicolon, the first thing I would do is I'd look at that answer choice to start with and think about, okay, either side of the full stop or the semicolon, do we have a full sentence or not? And because semicolons and full stops are usually the easiest to check whether they work or not, they are always the first answer choice that personally I would try and figure out if they work or not before moving on to cross out the other answers if that option is in fact incorrect. So, in the following example, we have only one answer with the semicolon in it. And if you want to pause the video at this point to figure out if this semicolon is used correctly or not, then please do so. And so if we look at answer choice H, this is the one with the semicolon in it. And before the semicolon, we have a trip from New York City to Albany, for example, took 7 days in a sloop. Is that a full sentence? Yes, it is. If we simplify the sentence, we have a trip took 7 days in a sloop. That feels like a full sentence. On the other side of the semicolon, we would have a steamboat shortened that trip to 1 day. And again, that is a full sentence. A steamboat shortened the trip to a day. We have subjects, we have verbs, we have objects. That is a complete sentence. And so the semicolon H is correct. And conversely, that is why F is incorrect, because the punctuation in F is the same, except for we have a comma, not a semicolon, and a comma cannot separate two full sentences. But we also need to be on our toes, even if the answer choices don't include either a full stop or a semicolon. We still need to be thinking about these kinds of issues, because if a full stop or a semicolon are the only things that can separate two full sentences, as we know, that means a comma cannot separate two full sentences. And so sometimes if you're stuck on a question where the only punctuation involved is commas, you might want to think about if one of our options or more actually creates two full sentences and tries to separate them with a comma, because then that would also be incorrect. So the following SAT example is one of my favourite examples of this happening. And in fact, none of our answers here have any punctuation in them at all. The only comma is the one before the word some. But if you want to pause the video and figure out why I've brought up this question here, please do pause it now and have a think about which answer you think is correct. Okay, and so the problem is to think about why some of these answers do or don't work. So if we took, for example, no change as it is, before the comma, we need to think about, do we have a full sentence? And we do. According to Box, a leading Greenland expert, tundra fires in 2012 from as far as North America produced great amounts of soot. That's a full sentence. Then what happens after the comma? With no change, some of it drifted over Greenland. Well, if we take just that part, that in itself is a sentence. Some of it drifted. That's a sentence. If we choose answer choice B, some soot drifted over Greenland. That also gives us a subject and a verb, some drifted. That is a sentence. If we delete the underlined portion, we have some drifted over Greenland. So answer choice D is also a sentence. Some drifted over Greenland is a sentence. So that only leaves us with answer choice C. If we try that out, some of which drifted over Greenland, that of which means that this clause is referring to the soot from the previous clause before the comma, and therefore that's not a standalone sentence. Some of which drifted over Greenland is not a standalone sentence, and so answer choice C is the only one in which we can use that comma, because here we're not separating two full sentences. Answer choice A, B, and D give us a new subject and a verb, and therefore a new sentence, and so using a comma there would give us a comma splice. So we could use a semicolon with answer choices A, C, and D, but the comma is not going to work, and we have to pick answer choice C. Okay, but that's basically it. The only real takeaway you need to know from this video is that semicolons are identical to full stops as far as the SAT and the ACT are concerned. As long as you remember that, you will always know whether you can use a semicolon or not in this particular case. In the next video, we're going to look at colons, which is the second most unusual form of punctuation. And again, there's only one or two things you need to know about how they are used, and then every other punctuation mark is basically probably going to be a comma. And that will hopefully facilitate your use of punctuation questions in the exam. If you find this useful, and if you want to keep watching these videos, please do like and subscribe. Please also leave me any comments below if there are any videos you would like me to make, or any types of questions I haven't yet tackled you'd like me to do. And also, if you want further help with the SAT and the ACT, if you think I can help you more than just through these videos, I'm also a tutor and I do one-to-one lessons. These can happen in London or in Glasgow, but typically these days I do all my teaching on Skype. So I can help you wherever in the world you are. And so if you would like more in-depth one-to-one help on these exams, please do get in touch. My website is below and my email address is on there. And so hit me up if you need any kind of help. Once again, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you guys soon.